We are here for our next episode of Conscious Physician, Medicine, and Psychedelics. And we have a dear friend, colleague, just incredible human in our community, Senator Jeff Steinborn, here with us. I had the pleasure of connecting with you, Jeff, during I call it the campaign for the Psilocybin Medical Act, SB 219, that you decided so kindly to sponsor in spring of 2025, so in the legislative session 2025 in New Mexico. Here we are, months later, it's been signed by the governor, and there's so much happening now over the ground about this beautiful work that you initiated and with such incredible grassroots organization that we want to capture history in the making, right? The pioneering work that we're doing here in New Mexico for really the rest of the country, perhaps the rest of the world, to be able to look at in its simplicity as well as its complexities that has gotten us to this point of rule making. Yeah. Tell us about
Absolutely.
yourself and whatever you want to share. I'm just so fascinated by all of this.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Lita. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for the work that you're doing, and truly important, compassionate work, and really honor you. And yeah, you and I met during the legislative session. I had introduced the Medical Psilocybin Act, and that was actually before that we introduced the bill. When someone said you really have to meet this woman and connect with her, and she's an expert. And I reached out to you to bring you into our work and get your help on this legislation. And it was really helpful to us. And then, of course, you were a very happy warrior to help us get the bill passed, which was just great. And your enthusiasm is very infectious. It's tough getting a bill passed into law. And little did we know, we were the first state in the country. We were the third state in the country to create a psilocybin program, but we were the first to actually do it through the legislature. So we were actually passing the first bill of its kind in the country through the legislative process. But yeah, I think a lot of my work is rooted in just advocating for people and causes that need an advocate. Once it kind of grabs me, I go to battle for those people and causes. And the cool thing about being a legislator is it's just a blank canvas that, depending upon what the issue is, if it's psilocybin or nuclear waste or helping kids or whatever it is, I can kind of go there and try to figure it out. So I had a constituent call me several years ago who had been battling treatment-resistant depression, and who had experience with microdosing and was aware that we had kind of looked into medical psilocybin, or no, we had taken some steps to kind of recognize that its therapeutic potential benefits. And what was I doing and what could we do? So that started my journey. And I promised her I'm going to look into this. And that started my path. And then it was just kind of one surprise after another, realizing not only the therapeutic potential of psilocybin to help a lot of people in suffering, but also that there was, in fact, a pretty fertile political landscape. So kind of led us down this path. First, we passed a bill to create a study in New Mexico in the Department of Health, which they did. And then, as we all hoped that would lead to, then partnership with the administration and support to then create a program. And we got it done. And it was just an amazing story. And as you said, now we're suddenly on the other side of standing up this program. So it's really exciting times.
Yes, so exciting. And thank you so much for sharing that background. And Senator, I'm so curious about, we can each speak to our own experience as we're going
Yeah.
through this journey. And I'll share a bit about my journey. It felt as if there was this, all of a sudden, grassroots movement
Hmm.
occurring with top professionals and people who had sought healing with psilocybin, veterans with some incredible stories, and with a lot of momentum and passion that people kept showing up. And we were all on text messages, we're all over, right? Just every day, go, go, go. We're like, let's show up on this. Here's the schedule. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And it was just like we would not let off the gas.
Hey, yeah,
And it was so exciting, and from somebody who was in it and watching it from the grassroots place. So I'm very curious. I've been meaning to ask you this
yeah.
question. How was it for you?
It's magical in the same way. It's different in that I've been to battle many times on different issues, but you never how a bill's going to turn out. And it's a mad dash. You have 60 days to try to pass a law, let alone something groundbreaking. And there's so many unknowns and so many potential opportunities to fail legislatively. So, I mean, in fact, you're hanging on kind of a cliff's edge. And sometimes things line up in political camps. And but traditionally, frankly, it comes to drug policy, they do end up not in a bipartisan place, but somewhat partisan place. And so you've got a narrow lane of getting a bill passed sometimes. And we're seeing that with some other states, frankly, that are trying to pass psilocybin. You look at the way the votes are breaking down in committee, and it was a bill in another state that passed 6-4 out of a committee. So this is kind of my history. And I was part of legalizing cannabis in New Mexico. I was part of when we created a medical cannabis program. I was in the legislature. I've been there a long time. It passed by the narrowest of margins. So with that history going into this, you can imagine my mind frame was this, you know, is going to be tough. And, but it's just, we were all delighted to see that the bipartisan support. And as you mentioned, it was surprising to me, people showing up for this issue that I didn't even know were going to show up, were combat veterans. It was their first time coming to a legislative hearing, and suddenly there they are testifying. And so honestly, my jaw was dropping along with everybody else, because hearing these stories, and I was watching the faces of the legislators whose votes we were about to need, and all of their jaws hit the table, and it was just so profound that it could not be denied. It was beyond a partisan moment. It was like, you got to be a special kind of person to listen to that and say, no, we're not going to allow this therapeutic option to people. It was amazing. And at the same time, part of the fun and cool part about being a legislator is I'm also an advocate. I do environmental advocacy in my day job. I'm a strategist as well. So in a way, I'm running the campaign and of mostly volunteers, including myself, but you're busy running your practice. So are all the other physicians. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic in and of itself. We were trying to do something so important, and yet we're dealing with essentially volunteers that were like, okay, I know you're busy. I know you have patients, but I really need you in Santa Fe for this committee hearing. And so it was just magic. It was magical. And as it moved through, and we had some big things break our way, and sometimes that's the way this happens, is you kind of come to an issue at the right time and place. And that's just kind of one of the great magical aspects to this process. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was cool for me too. Believe me.
that's amazing.
And then the governor signed the bill on my birthday. So,
Oh,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
It's last along with some other bills I was working on. So I had probably a dozen really important bills, and the governor ended up signing 6, 8 of my bills into law. So it was a really great session. Yeah. And this was obviously one of the cherries on the cake, of course.
A birthday to remember for the ages.
Indeed.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. I have to give you kudos for putting such a good bill together. I had glanced at the 2023 bill that had come out. I believe someone else was heading that one
Yeah.
or sponsoring, but it didn't have the substance that this bill had, that all of us professionals look for in order
Mm.
to be able to have a safe rollout for the
Right.
community in a way that is therapeutic and safe. And so really great work on drafting a very robust bill. And tell us a little bit about that. I have people from other states who listen to this podcast, and I know there are people from coast to coast who would be very interested to kind of see, hey, how do we navigate these waters? How do we show up for our
Yeah.
community and make our representatives do the work in the right way? How can we support them, and how can they create bills so that it is possible for this bipartisan support?
Sure. Well, I think it's easy to be overly prescriptive in a bill where you try to figure out every single detail. And clearly, there's so many regulatory programmatic aspects to standing up a medical psilocybin program that we wouldn't know the answer to. And you wouldn't want to rush and have us try to figure it out and put it into a bill without taking the proper time to study all the best options and look at what other states are doing. And so part of the elegance and simplicity of our approach here in New Mexico in the legislation was we delegated, appropriately so, a lot of these critical decisions to the Department of Health in the law itself. We say that the department shall establish proper dosing, medical setting, what's the proper licensure to be a practitioner to issue it. And we delegated to them, and consequently, you end up with a shorter bill, and you get to then give the public officials that are voting on it the confidence and comfort in knowing that we're going to get it right. We're going to take the right time to get it right. We probably in the bill, we put in a longer timeline than I had initially suggested because everyone felt like, no, no, this is the amount of time it's going to take. It's ironic that we're now moving it up, but because I tend to want to get things done, but at the same time, things always take longer. So yeah, I think there was a simplicity, but also the proper safeguards and delegation in our bill that made people feel comfortable, and we could really get behind it. And and of course, we had the Department of Health that was there at the table. I think this is really an amazing moment we have here that the Department of Health in New Mexico was very much in support of it, or we were worked together to craft this bill. They were sitting in the committee hearing, and I was able to say, as the Department of Health is sitting right here, if you have any questions about this approach, and they were part of drafting every single word of this legislation. I think those are lessons that other states can learn, is to the extent that you can not box yourself in, try to get the your Department of Health, your health agencies involved on a level that they're comfortable being involved in. And sometimes that means you have to take a little slower approach. We're seeing a lot of states start with studying it. In New Jersey, now they're looking at funding a 2-year pilot phase. So truth is, one size doesn't fit all when it comes to these kinds of policy. And of course, Colorado did a ballot initiative where they went much broader than we went in New Mexico. So it's just see where the opportunities lie. And I think advocates who are watching this also need to do work. I mean, there were people here in New Mexico, Soul Trip in southern New Mexico, Deb Thorne and her team. Obviously, the people up north who were working on this also for years, they did advocacy and education of policymakers. And so this will be new for a lot of people. And you can't assume that people automatically know about this or any issue. They need to be educated. And I would say in a professional way, the more professional, the better. But hopefully, I think the way you and I appreciate this moment we're at is not just that we're doing this for New Mexico, but what a springboard for other states to look at us and then be inspired and say, okay, here's a model and we can maybe try this here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners, if you want to look at the bill and how it was written, you can find it publicly. It's SB 219, Psilocybin Medical Act. And I believe this is the first medical act that went through under, I love the idea of having the DOH on board
Mhm.
and did that. And I believe it took maybe a couple of years of education there as well. Because I love my healthcare professionals,
Yeah.
being one, and I love my colleagues as doctors, but we tend to be more in the fear driven
Mhm.
aspect of things because we get to see the worst of the worst when patients come to us and families come to us. And so I do see, for example, in California a few years ago, it was the medical board that
Mhm.
negated. They were like, "No, we're not doing this." Because they didn't have in-depth education about it. And as physicians, we don't get that type of education. Hence
Yeah.
the reason we are creating the Conscious Business Psychedelics Academy. Deb Thorne is a guest faculty there, by the way. But the stigma, changing changing that fear response to designating everything under a Schedule 1 as a drug or as
Right.
bad, when you in fact see, for psilocybin specifically, over 2,800 PubMed published articles that are
Wow.
peer reviewed from the 1950s to today. And you see a huge sharp increase from 2016, when Hopkins came out with their
Mm.
end of life study with the
Mhm.
52 participants and showing that it was such a huge event for these individuals to go through this mystical experience. They no longer had fear of death at the onset of getting the news of having a life threatening illness. And it lasted for a long time. But there's just a lot of opportunity for us in the medical realm, in the healthcare field, to move the needle of utilizing these ancient therapeutics that have been used for millennia and bring it forward and say, let's integrate it in a proper way, in a safe way, into how we practice medicine. And us as practitioners also feel more fulfilled and satisfied because we see that there's a transformation, that we're not just giving these pharmaceuticals, which we need sometimes, but with the field of psychiatry, right? We keep giving, giving, giving. We max the dose, we add another agent, and so on and so forth. When we can microdose with some individuals, we can decrease the amount of medications they're on, maybe not to zero, but decrease so the toxicities are
Yeah.
less,
Mhm.
so the side effects are less. Or maybe in somebody, you do see an entire transformation and they're not needing to be on prescription medication. So, just so much possibility. And so, this is where I'm so excited and
Yes.
such a cheerful campaigner for you.
You are. Well, you live on the front line of trying to help people. And of course, you would embrace something that could possibly help people. And thank you for that. That's real leadership. And there's nothing wrong with, I think it's healthy to have a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yes.
And because we can also recognize and acknowledge and should that there may be contraindications with some patients where it may not be safe or it's not a silver bullet in all circumstances or even in anybody. They've got to do a certain amount of work. So it's good to have a healthy discussion and not oversell it. So anybody who's coming into it in your profession who says, show me the science, let's critically analyze these studies that people are talking about. I think all of that's healthy. And even though we're a lot farther now on this issue, gosh, I mean, people have been working on this for decades. For decades. It's so fascinating and longer. And of course, indigenous culture is using it for thousands of years. But in fact, I mean, being only the third state, we're actually kind of at the beginning of mass real data sets that we're a part of. And so think about how much we're going to learn 5 years from now. So it's all great. It's an emerging field as it should be. And that I think brings a certain humility and appreciation that it is science and we're going to still learn so much.
So much, so much. And thank you so much for that. And can we touch on where we are right now with the
Yes.
bill? So yeah, tell us about where we are with the bill and the rules and regs.
So the advisory committee of the law creates an advisory committee, a medical psilocybin advisory board, up to 9 people. I think they've appointed 7 now, and they have had 2 meetings. They've created committees. They've approved bylaws for themselves and it is an advisory board. I just want to just make that clear for people understanding the law. It's an advisory board to the Department of Health. The Department of Health will still be the one making the final rules, making the final regs. The advisory board is in law there to give advice and to be kind of an additional apparatus that can bring in feedback from the public and give their own scrutiny and suggestions. But they have, they've started that work. I think committee meetings are being set up, which is amazing. They've got 7 committees. The Department of Health, who I spoke to in the last few days just to get an update myself, are going to be consolidating all those advisory committees so that they're putting out a notice to us, the public, of here's when all the committees meet so that we're not having to try to track them all, trying to kind of organize it a little bit so people can tune into those. And then they're going to start having public meetings around the state, which is amazing. And the department has said that their goal is to start having some services available at the end of 2026. So that's pretty amazing, and it obviously puts things on a much quicker path. Even I mean, it's not the law. The law said did not have a timeline for the program to start. It just said no later than December 31st of 2027. So it didn't preclude what's happening now. It's just now they've said, okay, they put a time there and said by the end of 2026, we want to have the first practitioners. I think they're imagining kind of a slow rollout in the sense that it's not going to be full blown. It's going to be several practitioners, have all the elements in place, and then we're going to continually build out, including build out probably expanded rules for a broader set of circumstances involving psilocybin. And then now, what's interesting in 2026 is that we're heading into a legislative session in 1 month, which we are going to be making a budget that starts the middle of 2026 and will go through the middle of 2027. So we're actually going into a session to make a budget for the Department of Health that will be there throughout the beginning and launch of this program and the beyond 6 months. So there's some very important funding priorities that I would draw attention to, which we are wanting to continue. One thing cool we did was we created a research fund. So we're funding research on this, including in the area of palliative care and the end of life treatment that you're involved with. That's an area we recognize that we We like more research, and we're going to be on the forefront of that and trying to fund it directly. Number two, we have an equity fund, which is very cool. New Mexico has done. When we created this program at the very beginning, we said equity of access to treatment. It has to be a core value that people who can't afford this still need access to it. So we created a fund that if we fund it as a legislature or they raise philanthropic dollars, the Department of Health can actually sponsor paid treatments for folks that can't come up with it. So we're trying to raise money this legislative session, 500,000 for each of those for research and for this equity fund. And I would encourage people watching this to contact their legislator and say, this is so important. This is our moment. Fund equity fund. So those funds are available when this program starts and that we can continue the research so we can have as much knowledge as possible when we also start the program. And so those are some key priorities as we head into this coming legislative session.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing that up, and please get in contact with your legislators, and let's keep moving. Let's keep the
Right.
momentum of, doing more research, doing right by our people with the equity fund and end of life care. We need a lot more information as we move more scientifically through this path. Thank you so much,
You're so
Since.
welcome. My honor.
Yes, it's an honor to be here with you on this beautiful path. I'm just so excited for New Mexico and so excited to have New Mexico be one of the top leaders in mental health. For too long we've been on the other side, and I feel that with what we have, you really started and we continue to bring forward to the community, we're going to be on the top.
Thank you, Lita. Yes, we're on the cutting edge. That is for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to take
Mm,
too much more of your time. Have a
so much.
beautiful holiday season.
Thank you.
And thank you for your presence and for the beautiful work you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and look forward to continuing to work together in this exciting area.
Absolutely. Bye.